Right now, someone is playing until their heart stops. A sultan drowns 280 women to find one traitor. Shoe stores blast children's feet with radiation. I'm learning the world, and this is the history they never taught you. Let's talk about death. Not the peaceful, dignified kind. The kind that makes you wonder if the universe is run by a sadistic comedian with a dark sense of humor. These are real people who died in ways so absurd, so impossibly stupid, that if you saw them in a movie, you'd call it unrealistic. But reality doesn't care about your expectations. Ancient Greece, 456 BC. Aeschylus, the father of tragedy, the man who invented dramatic theatre. He wrote 90 plays about fate, gods and heroes. He survived wars and political chaos. But according to ancient sources, a prophet warned him, "You will die from a falling object." So Aeschylus did what any rational person would do. He avoided buildings, stayed outdoors, thought he'd outsmarted destiny. Then an eagle flew overhead, carrying a turtle. Eagles crack turtle shells by dropping them on rocks from great heights. The eagle spotted Aeschylus's bald head shining in the sun, mistook it for a rock, dropped the turtle. The father of Greek tragedy died because a bird had terrible aim and his head was too shiny. The man who wrote about inescapable fate got killed by a turtle he never saw coming. Now jump to 1871, Ohio. A courtroom. Thomas McGaheon stands trial for murder. Shot a man in a bar. His lawyer, Clement Vallandigham, has a brilliant defense. The victim accidentally shot himself while drawing his pistol. Simple theory, just demonstrated to the jury. Vallandigham grabbed what he thought was an unloaded gun, stood before the jury, confidently reenacted the scene. See, it's easy to fumble the gun and, bang, he shot himself in the stomach. The gun was loaded. He collapsed in front of the stunned courtroom and died 12 hours later in agony. But here's the insane part. His client walked free. The jury watched a man accidentally kill himself with the exact method he was describing, and they said, "Yeah, that's believable, not guilty." Vallandigham won the case by dying in front of them. He literally proved his point with his own death. Two men. One trusted prophecy and tried to avoid it. The other trusted logic and demonstrated it. Both dead in the most absurd ways imaginable. A turtle and a courtroom blunder. History doesn't care how smart you are, how careful you plan, or how much sense you make. Sometimes the universe just looks at you and decides today's the day you become a punchline. If this made you question everything, hit that like button and subscribe. Because we're just warming up. And trust me, it gets even more shocking from here. You think power corrupts. That's the understatement of the millennium. Give someone absolute authority, zero accountability, and watch them descend into madness so profound it makes horror movies look tame. These aren't fictional tyrants. These are real rulers who had armies, treasuries, and entire nations at their command. And they used that power in ways that defy sanity. England, 1120. King Henry I, one of the most powerful monarchs in Europe, had everything. Wealth, territory, respect. And he had an heir, his son William, the future of the dynasty. Then came the White Ship disaster. William's vessel sank crossing the English Channel. 300 nobles drowned, including the prince. When Henry heard the news, witnesses said he collapsed and never smiled again for the rest of his life. But grief wasn't enough. Legend says that during storms, Henry would stand on castle battlements and shoot arrows at the clouds, screaming at the heavens that took his son, trying to wound the sky itself. But here's where it gets truly dark. Henry's grief didn't just destroy him, it destroyed England. Without a male heir, the succession collapsed. When Henry died in 1135, the kingdom plunged into a civil war so brutal it's still called the Anarchy. 18 years of chaos. Castles burned, thousands slaughtered. Famine. After his son drowned, the king shot arrows at storm clouds and never smiled again. Then his grief drowned the kingdom in 18 years of civil war. Now let's talk about Sultan Mahmud II of the Ottoman Empire, 1826. According to Western accounts from the period, he had a harem of hundreds of women. One of them allegedly betrayed him. Maybe an affair, maybe whispered secrets. Mahmud didn't know which one, so stories claim he made a decision that defines the word overkill. He ordered all 280 concubines sewn into weighted sacks and thrown into the Bosphorus Strait. Every single one. Innocent or guilty didn't matter. Reports say fishermen found sacks washing ashore for weeks. He drowned 280 women in weighted sacks because one might have betrayed him, and he couldn't figure out which. And then there's Sweden, 1771. King Adolf Fredrik, a man so unremarkable that his greatest legacy is how he died. He attended a royal feast, ate lobster, caviar, sauerkraut, kippers, champagne. Then came dessert, semla, a Swedish pastry filled with cream and almond paste. He ate one, then another, and another. 14 servings, according to the accounts. Hours later, he collapsed and died from the feast. A king literally ate himself to death on dessert. They still call him the king who ate himself to death in Sweden today. 3 rulers. Unlimited power. One shot arrows at the sky until his kingdom bled. One drowned hundreds of women to punish a ghost. One ate cream pastries until he dropped dead at the table. This is what happens when you give broken people crowns and nobody can tell them no. Science is supposed to save us, cure diseases, extend life, make the world better. But here's the thing, nobody tells you. Some of the most horrifying acts in human history weren't committed by tyrants or madmen. They were committed by doctors in white coats who genuinely believed they were helping. Let's start with insulin shock therapy. 1927. A doctor named Manfred Sackel had an idea. What if we could reset the brains of mentally ill patients? The plan: inject massive doses of insulin, induce a coma for 6 hours, wake them up cured. So they did it. 50 to 60 sessions per patient. Patients would seize so violently their bones snapped, spines fractured, teeth shattered. Between 1 and 5% didn't wake up. They just died on the table. But here's the insane part. This wasn't some fringe experiment. This was mainstream psychiatry. Hospitals across America and Europe used it for 30 years. They injected patients with insulin until their brains shut down, broke their bones with seizures, and called it therapy for 50 years. It wasn't banned. It just faded out in the 1960s when better drugs arrived. Now let's talk about shoe stores. 1920s through the 1970s. Shoe stores had fluoroscopes, X-ray machines for perfect fit. Your child puts their foot into a machine and you see their bones inside the shoe through a viewer. Looks scientific, looks modern. What you don't see, that machine is blasting their feet with radiation 13 times stronger than a medical X-ray. No shielding, no time limits. Salesmen operated these machines 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. One man's leg turned black from radiation burns. They amputated it. Others got cancer. For 50 years, shoe stores irradiated children's feet with X-rays so parents could see if sneakers fit, and salesmen lost their legs to radiation burns. The last state to ban them? West Virginia in 1981. And then there's Bayer. Yes, the aspirin company. 1898. They synthesized a new drug and called it heroin, from heroisch, German for heroic, because it made patients feel invincible. They marketed it as a cough suppressant. Non-addictive, they promised. Safe for children. Recommended for infants with croup. Advertisements showed happy children. Perfectly safe, the ads claimed. Mothers gave it to crying babies. Doctors prescribed it for tuberculosis. Pharmacies sold it over the counter in little bottles with cheerful labels. They gave heroin to babies and called it medicine. It took 12 years before they realized they'd unleashed an addiction epidemic and pulled it from shelves in 1910. 3 examples. Decades of horror. Insulin-induced brain damage, radiation burns from shoe fittings, heroin for teething infants. This is what happens when science moves faster than ethics, and nobody asks, should we? Obsession doesn't just consume your time, it can consume your life. Literally. New York City, 1947. Brothers Homer and Langley Collier lived in a Harlem brownstone. When police finally broke down the door, they found 140 tons of garbage, 14 pianos, a human organ, thousands of newspapers stacked floor to ceiling, and booby traps. Langley had rigged the entire house with tunnels and tripwires to catch burglars. They found Homer's body first, dead from starvation. But where was Langley? It took 3 weeks of digging through the trash to find him, crushed under his own booby trap, just feet from his brother. Homer, blind and paralyzed, had waited for Langley to bring food. He never came. They collected 140 tons of garbage, built booby traps from trash, and died buried alive in their own obsession. Taiwan, 2012. Chen Rongyu, 23 years old, sat down in an internet cafe to play Diablo 3. 40 hours later, he stood up, stumbled, and collapsed. Dead. A blood clot from sitting motionless had traveled to his heart and stopped it. The cafe didn't notice for hours. They thought he was sleeping. He played a video game for 40 hours straight until a blood clot stopped his heart, and the cafe didn't notice he was dead for hours. He's not alone. Over 10 documented cases in Korea and China. Gamers who played until their bodies gave out. Obsession doesn't care if you're hoarding newspapers or chasing digital loot. It will bury you either way. Drop a comment. What's the most obsessive thing you've ever done? How far is too far?